Gettysburg Museum of History Studios.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Didn't mean to scare you with that. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we're talking about something that many of you, I'm sure, have heard of, you're fully aware of, and you probably have an idea of what their purpose was and how they helped the armies, or the army of the United States Army, excuse me. Sorry, let me just fix my camera there. And whatnot. But we're going to get into the nitty gritty today of what they did here at Gettysburg and how they helped the army after the battle, right? And specifically at the Spangler Farm. And with us today, we have Susan Wall, who I hear you are a recent patron.
Yes, I am.
So patrons watching, here is a fellow patron of yours. So thank you very much, Susan, and thank you guys as well. I don't know. I'm looking at the monitor. That's me. I should be looking at the camera because that's them. But Susan, tell us a little bit about what you do at the Spangler Farm.
I am part of a group that does a setup representing the Sanitary Commission.
Okay,
and
so living historian?
Living historian, historical interpreter, public historians.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever the current term is.
Right.
But the basic idea is presenting what the Sanitary Commission did to the public.
Now, how did you get into doing this?
Lifelong insanity.
I mean, isn't that really everybody's reason for whatever we do?
I started out with a reenacting group a whole long time ago.
Okay.
And then the concept of civilian living history groups came about, and I was there.
So you were doing military first.
I was a civilian with a military group.
Right. So
yeah, that is utterly unsatisfying.
Right. Because what do? Just like walk around behind them and stuff, right? You just hang out in camp.
And be there to answer the public's questions, which hopefully I did well.
Yeah. And you liked that part?
Yes,
yeah.
very
and
much.
So then this makes more sense to transition into the civilian living historian thing.
This is a little more organic and rational.
Right. And so how did your organization get set up with the Spangler Farm?
I happened to be at another site in another state, and a group from Gettysburg pulled in their school buses, and I'm a local, so I had to talk to the teacher.
Okay.
And he was involved with Spangler Farm and invited us to come up.
Okay. And are you a teacher?
I am.
What do you teach?
Preschool.
Preschool. Oh, that's cute. But that's got to be kind of tough though, with all the little rugrats running around.
I love it.
Yeah.
I really
You have to.
do.
You have to be able to do that. Like that's my favorite age. When my niece and nephew were that age, that was my favorite age of theirs, because they're still little. They still want you to pick them up and play with them, but then they're also independent enough where you can go, all right, go play, and they'll go off and play. But they say the funniest things at that age. But 20 or 30 of them. How many do you have in the class?
18.
Okay, 20 of them. That's got to be tough. So you really have to love the job.
Some days are more challenging than others, we'll say.
I bet.
Right now we have a wonderful class.
But it prepares you for dealing with the public.
Absolutely. Or vice versa.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand, right?
Yes.
So, so tell us about the U.S. Sanitary Commission. How did it start?
It's got its start because in the spring of '61, when all these young men are rushing into training camps in the New York City area, they were being visited by friends and relatives, mostly society women, who noticed that these young guys were dropping like flies and landing in the hospital, and nobody's had a chance to fire a shot in anger yet.
Okay.
So these women got together. They talked with Elizabeth Blackwell, the first noted woman physician in the States. And they talked with assorted society men, and they formed the Women's Central Relief Committee. And that eventually coalesced into the Sanitary Commission to help get camp inspections done because these guys did not know, and their officers didn't take into account, you don't put your latrine upstream from your drinking water.
You know, you would think that would be something you just would know, but I guess not, right?
Apparently not a thing.
And I think it was Peter Carmichael's book, The War for the Common Soldier, where he gets into how when these guys all first get together and they go into camp, if they had to relieve themselves, they would just walk out of their tent and pee on the side of it. And maybe go a little further away to do number two. But there was no set way to go to the bathroom, which, we take that for granted today. Everywhere you go to a concert in a field, you go to a horse race in a field, there's porta-johns everywhere. They're
the international signs. Yes.
Yeah. And, but back then it boggles my mind that wasn't a thing. I mean, it's not like this is the first time the United States fielded an army. So you think we would have known this by now? But
the first time they fielded an army of this size.
Okay.
And looking back, maybe health rates weren't so good in previous armies either.
Yeah, probably. So they decide let's be smart about where we go to the bathroom. What other things did they do?
They helped to make sure that these guys changed their socks and underwear at least once a week.
Okay.
Mom was not there to tell them to do that.
Right.
They developed an entire inspection report, and the Sanitary Commission agent, the male agent, would come in and check this, check that. In addition to the latrines, does the officer allow them to do things such as have a few hours off every week? Are there writing materials available so that these guys can write home? Is the mail delivered in a timely manner? So these
are all good things for health and morale.
And an awful lot of them are going into the mental health aspect that we don't consider that era to think about.
Right. But is it kind of the start of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is before Freud, but right. Yes, it is the start.
It's like the early stages of trying to figure that stuff out.
Yes.
Yeah, which is interesting because, we often stumble upon this theme where warfare in the United States, the Civil War, is like, well, all of them, but this one in particular is kind of like the birth of modern everything, modern medicine, psychology, just these things that we all just assume were always around. They weren't, or were always good. They weren't until the Civil War, where you had the chance to practice things and experiment. I don't want to use that word like in the Mengele sense, but like they had to trial and error, yes. They had to figure things out. And warfare is probably one great place to do that.
You have mass concentrations, and you had people who kept fantastic records.
Yeah.
Not since the Roman army.
Right. So, so now they're in existence for 2 years roughly by the time they get here?
Yes.
Okay. And they're not just with the Army of the Potomac, right? They're with everybody.
They are everywhere. And I'm talking with my hands, Patreon. Sorry.
So, I'm assuming then they're also supplying clean drinking water.
They do have clean drinking water available. One of the supplies that they had here at Gettysburg were water coolers, water tanks to put fresh drinking water into to be dispersed within the hospitals.
And what would they do to, I've always wondered this because, we see Westerns and old movies and everybody stops with their horse and they kneel down and take a handful of water from a creek. And, I know
that you're playing Russian roulette.
Right. And you're dying of thirst. You're going to take whatever you can get, right? But you're probably picking up a couple parasites or other things in there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was done. It had to be done. These guys were trying to survive in tough conditions. What would they do to clean the water? Would they just boil a lot of water and dump it in these tanks? Or how did that work?
That is a question I do not have an answer to, but They are, just as the soldiers are, dealing with whatever the local water supply is.
Okay. So maybe just going and pumping it out of wells and things like that.
and hoping that it is clean. Trying to avoid it if it doesn't look clean.
Right. How would they tell that? Maybe a smell, maybe if it had a certain smell?
Smell, the miasmas, color.
Okay.
If it looks bad, whatever is in it, if there's something dead lying there, you might want to avoid that.
Yeah. Like when in Dance with Wolves, when Kevin Costner finds the dead deer in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so they bring the water in and everything like that. When they come here? So I'm assuming Gettysburg isn't the only battlefield that they would come to after a battle. That was their job, right? Was they would go to wherever the battle was and do their thing.
They would do their best. Often it would be a little more behind the lines.
Okay.
Gettysburg, they were here. They set up here, went into the Corps hospitals, Corps and Division, and then to Camp Letterman, and they were there the entire time. Antietam is another example of where they set up and were there pretty much for the duration of as long as medical facilities were there.
Where did they, or when did they arrive here? What date?
They had representation here on the first day.
Okay, so with the Army.
They had wagons, I believe it was 3 wagons that came up from Frederick and distributed supplies on the first day of the battle.
Okay. And then called up the rest of them.
They called up the rest. Normally things would be sent up from their depot in D.C., and for this they were able to bring things up from Frederick.
Okay. What did they do? Get it by train to Frederick and then?
They, some of it would come by train into Frederick. They also had a supply there that was
just already like a warehouse.
And that was what they were able to draw upon.
Okay.
The military was using the railroad line to Westminster. And it was a longer route for some reason. I don't know why. Something about armies on the road, maybe.
Maybe you had to avoid things.
But starting on, I believe, the 4th of July, this commission made arrangements that there would be 1 railroad car full of commissioned supplies to go to Westminster and then be brought up by wagon. And a couple of their wagons were captured by Confederates.
Oh.
So this is not unhazardous duty.
Okay, sure. Now, when they're up here and the battle is over, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that's when their work really begins.
Absolutely.
And they can't just be at the Spangler Farm, right?
No, they are all over.
Okay.
The Spangler Farm is an extent example where we are able to go in and represent what the commission did in an actual place.
Like where they were.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are there.
Right. So what would they do? So walk me through the setup there.
The wagons.
Well, we should probably, for those who don't know, the Spangler Farm at this point is now going to be a huge hospital.
The 11th Corps Hospital.
Right. And what was it, like 1,500 men or something went through there?
Thereabouts.
About
200 of them, I believe, were Confederate.
Oh, interesting.
One of whom is Armistead.
Right, the most famous. Is he the most famous? Is there another famous one?
He is the most famous, probably, person at all to be at the Spangler Farm.
So the 1,500 soldiers, I mean, it's a big farm, but the problem is, like, it's raining. Right?
Yes.
And these guys, it's not like the barn can hold all 1,500 of them.
They set up tents. They take over other buildings. Armistead was placed inside the summer kitchen.
Right. So anything they can get their hands on.
Absolutely anything that they can utilize is utilized.
And so obviously the medical staff is going to do medical things.
Correct.
So how does the Sanitary Commission support them?
They bring in additional supplies. One Army doctor at a hospital, and this is while the battle is going on, sees the commission wagon and says something like, "Thank God the Sanitary is here. Now we can get things done."
Oh, okay, good. So listen to the rest of this interview and dozens like it. Support the show and get early access to special episodes, early and discounted ticket sales, and more. The second lieutenant level and above gets access to all monthly Patreon episodes. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, choose a tier, and join. And I thank you in advance.